So we're into part 2 of our IKEA kitchen installation course. Part 1, we showed you how to plan your kitchen, what factors to consider for that. Now we're into building our bases and setting them, figuring all that out. Before you do that, I would just recommend just build all your boxes, have them ready. What's nice about that is if you want to double check the actual physical size just to be sure, then you have them. You can start sorting them out, measuring them, make sure everything works. So that way when you plan your bases, you feel comfortable with that. So just a couple tips on assembling these. Make sure that you have it down on a smooth surface, because a lot of time when you're building the units, this is a base cabinet, they're going to be face down. So try to avoid sliding them around. Make sure they're nice, clean, smooth surface so you don't gouge the front finishes of the cabinet. I'm not going to go crazy into detail. One thing to consider before you nail this panel in, they have a dotted line of where to set the nails. Just do a diagonal measurement like that. So we have that dimension and this dimension. They have to be very, very, very close. And that way the box is square. So we have 42 and 7/16. 42 and 7/16. So that's one thing, just do that. Make sure if you jarred it, it's not totally at a square. The other thing is if you have a big long pantry unit, just make sure that it's parallel, that you don't have any bulges in your pantries, or that you're not towing it in or, making it concave as you nail on that back panel. Just make sure that everything's parallel and everything will just fit together that much better when you start install. So now we're going to get a little more into the detail. We have to figure out what size to make the bases and how high. Now this, like I said, this is a custom feature that isn't built into the IKEA system, but I'll show you how to do it. And I like it, it's a lot more sturdy. You're going to start out, I like to just draw a little sketch, just an overview of my kitchen layout. So that's the kitchen layout, just to help me visualize that. Keep it simple. I've marked out my panels. That way, when I order everything at IKEA, I tell them what panels I want, because I know the system, I know what sizes are available, and I know what I need for fillers and my peninsula and stuff like that. So I have that. We've already begun to do some layout and marking on the wall and the floor. We'll dig into that a little deeper as well. Here's my bases cut list. This is it spelled out to a T, perfectly visualized. I know exactly what I need to do. But let's figure out how I got there, and I need to figure out how high to make these things. So I'm going to show you how the system works, how to calculate your base height. So we're going to base the system fully off of theory. We have a 90-inch high pantry. Whoa. So let's call this pantry. Okay. This box is 90 inches high. Then, so we're not counting toe kicks yet. Then we have our base cabinets. These are 30 inches. Well, they're 13 1/8 if you measure exact. Okay. Then we have some uppers. So for a 90-inch tall pantry, it goes with the 40-inch tall uppers. Right, so let's say a door here and this is a door here. So this is 40. Let's draw on the countertop. Your countertop is 1.5 inches, let's say. They can be 1.25 or 1.1 inches depending what you're doing, but this scenario we're going to go 1.5 inches. So what I need is, I need 36" from top of countertop to the floor. So this is going to be, it needs to be 36 for all the other components to work. So what do I need to make this toe kick or this base so that it's the dimension we need? So basically what I do is I take 30 1/8. Now, as when you look around and you can see, we've already put and installed our underlayment. So we have no other plywood to install. So we just have flooring. We're doing vinyl plank, which is 1/8. So we have 1/8 for vinyl plank. We have 1.5 inches for the countertop. That equals 31 3/4. So from here with our flooring to there is 31 3/4. So 36 minus 31 3/4 equals 4 1/4. So that's how we calculate how to figure out the height of the base. Now, if you didn't have underlayment and you want to install it later, if you had 1/2 inch material, you just need to make your base 1/2 inch taller. So that way, when you go and install the underlayment, then it eats that up, but you still finish floor to countertop 36. And the reason I pointed out the 90-inch tall cabinet height here is because with the IKEA system, you kind of need to know that so you know what height to install the upper cabinets. Sometimes you can customize it. If you don't have an upper that's attached to a pantry, you can kind of select the height you want. But if you're tying a system all together, then the height of this is based off of the height of your pantry units. So I just want to point that out. One last thing is then we'll just be 4 1/4 here. So it'll be total height 94 1/4. So you could use this system if you have a house with an 8-foot main floor. You can still use the 40-inch tall uppers. You'll just be very close to the ceiling, or save a little money and have the cabinets a little lower. Just use the 30-inch tall uppers. But that's how we figure out the base. Now we need to figure out the depth of the bases. So I made another sketch here just so I could help me visualize, because we're gonna shoot for 3.5 inches back. So that's from the finished door to the finished toe kick, 3.5 inches back. Do a little math because we're gonna use, I'm gonna call it a 1/2 inch thick filler panel, which is those 15 by 90s that I showed you earlier. We're gonna rip those down for a toe kick. So here I just made a sketch. I have a 24-inch deep cabinet and then another 3/4 of an inch for the door. Then I have my plywood base and a 1/2 inch material for my finished toe kick. So then I just basically calculate that all out, and I want 3.5 inches from finish to finish. Do a little math, works out to 20 3/4 inch depth of our bases. So with that, now I can calculate all the lengths of my bases based on the layout that I have on the wall. So let's get into that. We'll jump into the layout again to determine the lengths and sizes. So once again, we go back, dead center of our window is our sink cabinet. We come over 18 inches from center to the edge. We know that from here, we have a 30-inch cabinet. So then I mark here, there's a 30-inch cabinet there. Here we have that 47-inch lineal cabinet. We've laid out the location of our range. We found the center mark there. We measured over 15 inches either way. So we know we need a cabinet here, and the cabinet needs to land there. So we'll start with that. We'll show you how to figure out the sizes of these bases, and then we'll just move around that peninsula area. Some of this may be a little hard to visualize until we get into the installation. So my cabinet is here. I don't need a filler panel, but I want my base to be set back 5/8 of an inch. And that's because if I went flush with the cabinet, when you pulled the stove out, you would see to the side just straight up plywood. So when I do my toe kicks, I just set this back. Instead of setting it back 1/2 inch, I just went back 5/8. I'd rather have it underneath my cabinet than sticking past. We know, okay, so then from there, basically I just measure to the inside corner and I take my measurement, and if anything, I could be a squeak less. So I'm 36 and 9/16, and I just wrote it down on my drawing as 36.5. So if you look at the sketch that I made, same thing here. I have this corner cabinet. I'm just gonna build a base exactly like this, just a rectangle. Same thing here, measure back 5/8, make a mark, measure there. I'm 48.25, but just to give myself a little extra playroom, I don't need to be super tight there. I went 48.125. Okay, now that I know I'm 20.75 inches deep, I go 20.75 inch deep there. I make a mark. So this is this base going this way. Then I just need to build one base to hold up my 30 and my 36-inch cabinet. So really all I did there is, because I have it all fully laid out, I just set the old tape down, lock it in. I make my mark over here. We'll get to my setback there. It ends up being 70 and 5/16 of an inch. So that will be one base, and then I can screw it into this corner. Basically this kitchen, there's not a crazy amount of custom setbacks. My 36-inch sink cabinet is here. Same thing, I don't want a plywood, my base. I don't want my plywood base flush with my cabinet. Like, not that it would really matter, but before we install the dishwasher, I'll put a finished toe kick there, and then that'll be right onto flooring, and I'll silicone this whole space. That way if the dishwasher ever leaks, the water will be forced out the front and you'll know of the issue right away. So that's why I like to do the toe kick there. And then let's just keep going. And this is where it was nice to actually have the cabinets built. I know for a fact that this other corner cabinet is 46.75 exactly. So I just measure back, but I know that I want my base 5/8 of an inch back from my cabinet. I just measure that. So I took off a little extra. I made this base 46 inches long. So that will go right to here on my peninsula. Now I don't need a toe kick, like I don't need it to be set underneath my cabinets there, because this is gonna have an eating bar. The countertop will extend a foot, so there's no chance of kicking your foot into the cabinet. So these finished panels over here will go and sit right down nice and flat on the finished flooring. Now, how do we calculate this base? Same thing. I know that it's 20.75 of an inch wide, so I made a mark there. I just throw my tape. Well, actually what I did here, let's show you what I did over here. Laid out all my cabinets. Now, because this is a corner, there is a chance that you could kick your toe into the cabinets here. I just had to gouge and get this wire to move over a little bit. I did the same 3.5 inch back set. Now the reason it's 3.5 is because this will get a 1/2 inch finish on it, and so does the edge of the cabinet. So it's, the back set is just 3.5. So then I just mark, measure, I just basically throw the old tape over here, lock it down, and make sure my marks line up, and I'm 92 inches for my base here. Now, I guess now I'll show you a little bit of a custom feature that we're gonna do on this peninsula that I think just helps me assemble it, helps me mount the panels a little easier. So I'll pull out a cabinet and I'll show you what I mean. If you notice on my sketch, I wrote why. Why is this base a little shallower? And that's because what I like to do on islands and that is I like to take off these little plastic spacers. The cabinet is actually 23 5/8, and then these add 3/8 to create a 24-inch deep base cabinet. So I will remove these. Then I like to actually fill each one of these spaces with plywood. So I've bought 3 plywood, and when we get to doing the finished panels, I'll show you how it all works, but I infill this. Then when I put my cover panels, I have a little extra strength. These aren't flapping around. I can install brackets and corbels to hold up maybe a granite or quartz countertop and allow that eating bar to function. So because I remove these, I have to just subtract 3/8 of an inch off of the depth of this toe kick just running this direction. So yeah, now we're ready to build. We have our cut list, we have our sketch, we know exactly what we need to do. Now we're gonna build. So I'm just gonna start building some L ties and you'll see how it all fits together as we go. Now you can see our bases are built. They're just sitting loosely in place. There's a couple more steps we have to do before we start putting them together and leveling them out. We're just gonna throw some cleats down on the bottoms just so we can have something to shim to and screw down. So we'll do that throughout. Just so you can kind of visualize, now you can see if this base was flush to the cabinet, you'd see that wood when you pulled out your stove. So we'll just cap that when we do our toe kicks later. And so and if you just look over here, now that everything's just kind of loosely in place, I want to just put some backing at where each cabinet meets, where the 30 meets the 36. I want to just mark out where to put a divider there, and on this peninsula too. We just got 2 locations that we want to point out. We'll just do 2 there and there. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. We'll put those dividers in, some bottom cleats, then we'll actually start leveling this in. So I'm just gonna mark these out. And it doesn't have to be like crazy accurate. I'm just gonna mark, this is gonna be the center of my divider. So I'll just go 35 1/4, and then I'll do the same mark here. And then that'll just be rough halfway. So I'll do that there. So after I mark these out, the other thing that I'm gonna do is while they're out of the way, because we're gonna start screwing these in soon, I wanna find out all my stud locations. I'm gonna transfer some of those up. That way I have them so I can screw this into a stud, but also transfer it up so that when I put my rail in for the cabinets, I know where studs are as well. So that's just something that I'm gonna do once all the bases are out of the way. So the reason I just keep a simple frame to the bases and then set them down is I used to go hardcore and put all my bracing, the bottom ones and all the dividers, and sometimes I'd either be wrong on the dividers or there'd be a pipe in the way or something. So now it's just better to just lay them down, mark it out, and then it's like, okay, well, if there's a pipe in the way, I know where not to put something, right? The other thing I need to do is just mark, there's a floor register that needs to get put up through here. So I need to cut a hole into this base and probably build a little bit of a framework so that the airflow can push out to the front. So I'll do that, but I'll just mark center right now. So I'll just go from the edge to my center mark on the wall, 17 3/16. And I'll just make that here. 17 and 3/16 center of the register. Then, actually what I'll do is I'll put a divider here, here, here. So I'll put one at 27, X to the left, 27, X to the left. And then I'll do one, actually this register, I need to double check. I think they're 3 by 12 or 3.5 by 12. So I need to double check that, but I'll just mark it out for now. So if this is the edge, then I will just put a little filler in here at say 9.5. X to the left, 9.5. Once I get these in, I'll just place it back down and I'll do another divider this way, cut this hole out, finish all my supports. Got to keep your fingers away. So we found out those narrow registers for a toe kick are 2.5 by 12. So we'll just lay this out real quick. So that's my center. We have 4 1/4, which half of that is 2 1/8. So we'll just go 2 1/8, center, and then 2.5 is 1 1/4 back each way, 6 either way. And I like to just drill each corner out with the drill. Gonna have to tone the sound down on that one. We'll just dry fit this, but we can't forget to lay out our stud locations. So we'll just make sure this all works. Remember my base mark on the wall, which is right there. So now we've built that cubby to force the air out of the front. Now we'll lay out all the studs. There's two or three ways to find a stud inside of a house. One, and we've lucked out here, so I can see some nail pops where the head of the drywall screw is kind of dimpled and made like an outie dent in the drywall. So I can see one right here, and I can see a few on this wall. So those are there. Obviously, a better choice probably for you guys is just get a stud finder. And there's stud finders that you got to keep in mind that some find the edge of the stud and some find the center. And another way is we can kind of figure out, like over here we have two electrical boxes, and typically those are put up to the side of a stud. So this one over here, if I look, I can see a stud through a couple of the side holes there. So I just calculate back halfway to 3/4. Now to verify that that's not just a chunk of wood attached to a stud, I just mark 20 3/4. Came down here, marked 20 3/4. Made sure I wasn't higher than my countertop, but that'll be tiled anyway, so it doesn't matter. And just ran a test screw. So I know there's a stud there. So if we did the job properly and did a layout the way we should have, should be every 16 inches. And I'm gonna just double check that. Yep. That one I'm going to just put an X. That didn't seem to hit anything. It's always good to double check. That one's good to go. So I lucked out here. My guys, they kind of train themselves, rather than putting a screw anywhere on the bottom plate of the wall, they actually just get in the habit of putting the screw right in the stud location. So I checked every one of these screws. I went up the wall and did a test, and every one of those landed bang on. So I really lucked out. My crew is awesome. Gotta appreciate that when it comes time to install stuff like this. Now that we've taken a little time and planned out all our stud locations, as long as you don't hide them in behind your toe kick, it's gonna save you later. Transfer them up above your cabinet height, then you don't have to figure it out again. It'll save you time. Now everything's ready to get fastened together. So the two L-shaped cabinets, I'm just gonna go ahead and fasten those together, get those nice and sturdy, and then we're just gonna get a lay of the land, figure out what's the highest point, and see where we start shimming the cabinets from. So let's get these fastened together first. And I want to fasten top and bottom. That way I want this to be as straight as possible. So by fastening, cutting everything on the miter saw, fastening top and bottom, this should be very, very straight, as close as possible. And I'm just using 1 1/4 inch screws right now, just so that it doesn't blow out the other side, and if I have to reach in there later, I don't gouge my hand. So the whole point of doing the plywood bases and getting them perfectly level off the hop is then after that, it's just placing the cabinets on. If you try to, like some guys, what they'll do is they'll pre-mount a base to every single individual cabinet. Then they just kind of push them all together and try to get them level. Problem with that is if you have the very back corner that is unlevel, like it's kind of sunk down, there's no way to shim that. So usually it's just like, oh, well, screw it, like everything's already done, let's just leave it. But this way of doing it is the ultimate way. So now we just get the big level out and we start figuring things out. So basically you want to find the high point and then level everything off of that. Now if you have really good foresight, before you even rip your toe kicks or your bases to height, maybe just take the level around your kitchen. If it's an older house and it's really out of level, you might want to consider either A, just ripping them to the 4 1/4 and then scribing them as the floor shifts around, or just cut them smaller. Like let's say your floor is an inch out of level, cut them all an inch short and then go from there. But yeah, renos are a little tricky if things are unlevel, but just try to think ahead, plan ahead. Okay, so right here, if anything, this end could come up. So if I just lift my level, yes, that makes it more level. So if anything, that could come up. So then let's just check this way. Cool. So now this is saying this could come up. So maybe there's just a very slight dip in the floor. One thing I can do now that I have this, I have the best level in the world, this 6 to 10 foot Stabila. I just got to make sure that cord isn't messing me up. I can go one end to the other. And it's so like we're splitting hairs here. It's very, 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 very close. The thing about this is that you want it leveled across here so that by the time you get to the top and your countertops are in place, you don't have some discrepancy and your stove doesn't line up nice and flush. It'll look goofy. So this is an important step. Like I'm not lying. You got to look at that. I'm not lying. It's level. It's bang on. Can't make this stuff up. So Mike, one of the journeymen who helped, well, he pretty much built this whole house. We were just joking with the homeowner how we didn't spend much time on your floor. The other house we did, it was bang on level, but this one we didn't care about, but we were just joking. Obviously, we did something right. So, and making sure it's not teeter-tottering on something. This end could come up, like I'm talking, I don't know if you can see that, maybe a 1/16. So this could be considered a high point. This stuff could come up. So if this needs to all come up, it's saying this end of the kitchen is high. This is one part that you want to make sure that it isn't dipped, so you just judge the gap by the underside there. Yeah. So this is saying it's got to come up. So we'll just move it one more location. We'll just try it maybe over here. And it's saying the same thing. Very minute, it's got to come up. So what's nice about doing it this way is rather than firing a bunch of screws in and then having to redo it all, just take 5 minutes, get everything sorted in your mind. Now we'll take a small chance because, you know, I'll probably start here, make sure that's all level, get it 100%, move this way, but in theory, this should just need to come up a hair, and then everything's set and ready for cabinets. Okay, well, this is bang on level. Not even gonna touch it. I'm just gonna tag it with a couple. I'm gonna slide this over, make sure that this isn't dipped down or something or humped up. So that looks good. Oh yeah. Just gotta bring this up just a little bit in the corner. So let's start here. So that whole back is perfectly level. We've checked it a couple times. One last thing you want to check is this way. If you get that all fastened and then all of a sudden this has to drop, you got to take it all out and actually lift the back. But right now, this level's saying that the front's got to come up, so that's okay. I can plug a screw in there. I just got to make sure that I'm on my baseline. of where I wanted my base to sit in relation to my cabinet. So we're deadly there. Now, one thing I want to say about this is this is an ICF wall. So this is an exterior wall. It's an ICF wall. What that means, if anyone doesn't know, or you can check out some of my other videos, it's essentially a hollow Lego block. 2 3/4 inch of foam on one side, 2 3/4 on the other, and you fill it up with concrete. So typically people just use it for foundations and they think that that's all it's capable of, but we build full houses out of it. It gives you extra R value, extra strength. They're disaster proof, wind proof, all that. There's a ton of benefits. So like I said, I had other videos on that. One thing you got to consider is if you don't know anything about it, it's like, well, how do you fasten a foam? Well, built into the system, every 8 inches is a snap tie. Those snap ties is what hold the foam together while you're pouring your concrete, but it's also built into the system so that every 8 inches you have a stud that runs a vertical up the wall. So you actually have twice the amount of attachment as a regular stud wall. So on this whole wall, I laid out my mark 16 inch on center, but if one is a little goofy, I can actually just shift and go 8 inches over and I'll still find a snap tie or a stud. So hopefully just a little brief explanation on that. So what you'll see is when I fasten this in, it'll go in quick and then it'll pause for a second and it has to just kind of chew through the plastic and then it bites. And you can tell that it bites hard. Like it's not flimsy stuff. But I'll show you what I meant by it just pausing out. And then it kind of sits and spins, and then you got to give it some torque to let it go in. So we'll just fire a few more in here. Like I said, I'm not going to go crazy, just in case I messed up and miscalculated or misjudged something. Now what I'll do is, because this just dipped down a hair, make sure I'm still level. Yep. Then all I have to do, figure out where my stud is. Might have to I don't know if my drill will fit in there very well. I'll just shim this up until this base touches the level. But keeping in mind, I don't want it to press and lift and create a gap here. Just enough so it touches. The only problem with a floor this level is the fact that you need a pretty thin shim to actually adjust it. Just got to make sure that cord doesn't bugger me up. So that's got to come up a micron. Perfect. So that's set. There's a stud right here, so it was a little tricky to hit. Once again, the best levels ever. So versatile, good for formwork, basements, framing, cabinets, doors. Yeah, so there's a link in the description for the Stabila levels. They are the best. And before I get too crazy, make sure that this doesn't need something different. If you noticed, kind of freaked me out. If you look there, it's saying this has to come down. So I'm like, oh, I got to readjust everything. But because I screwed it in so tight, it lifted it up. So if you actually push back down on it, it's sitting bang on level. So good thing, kind of lucked out there, but just one thing to be aware of. I'll do a little bit longer screws there. That's just to tag it for now. Okay, let's get this peninsula done. Okay, so I just got to make sure that this lines up with my base mark on the wall. That's critical for this. Just going to make a stud mark on my base here, here. Notice here, these are 8 inches on center. Everything else is 16. Like I said, if there's a goofy measurement, I just move it to 8 and I still hit a tie. Yep, that's got to come up, so that's good. So on this scenario, got to make sure I maintain on my chalk line because it is square. I did a 3-4-5, which is just a method of squaring things. So I measured from the outside wall behind you, parallel over, chalked the line. Then I made my 2-foot mark for my cabinets. I chalked that line. So then I had 2 perfectly straight lines. From the intersection, I just I measure over 6, I measure over 8, and then I do a diagonal. And if they intersect at 10, that means it's square. And that's just a real quick and dirty, but I have videos on that as well. But just the 3-4-5 method is perfect. The chalk line is square, so that all the cabinetry and everything is good to go. So this, I have one of these tie downs right here, about that location. So I want to make sure I'm level from here to here. If it's got a dip in the middle, we'll figure that out after. So it's got to go up. I'll probably use a 2.5-inch screw for there because it's shimmed up. Anywhere where it's sitting tight, I'll just use a 2-inch screw. You don't want to go too long with your fasteners, like into your stud wall. Don't use super long fasteners because what if there's electrical or plumbing in there? Just get enough so you have like a good bite into a stud. Same here, if there's floor heat or hydronic heating in the house, and I just start blasting long fasteners in, I could blow something up below. So you just got to be cautious. And always double check after you fasten it just because it might suck it down. Perfect. For here, I'm going to run the 6-foot this way and then just double check it with this little guy. Make sure that this corner's accurate. Probably trust the 6-foot over anything. Okay, I like that. It takes a little bit of time, but I swear, if you spend a little more time now, it saves you down the road. This is the hardest part. If you've made it this far in the series, the rest is just easy. It's the fun stuff. It's the part of it's like, oh, look at how much you got done in one day, right? It is the fun part. Cool. All right, so we'll just go one more clip. So all I have to do now, just double check the fronts of these, make sure everything's level. But other than that, you get the gist of it. Bases are 100% done. They're fully shimmed, leveled, fastened down. Part 2 is finished. And now we go on to part 3, where we show you how to set the lowers, set some of the uppers, some of the rail systems, and some of the filler panels on the inside corners and against walls. Stay tuned for that.